Om Mauna Vyakhya Prakatita Parabrahma Tattvam Yuvanam Varshistante Vasat Rishiganai Avrita Brahmanishtai Acharyendram Karakalita Janmatramanandarupam Swatma Ramam Mudita Vadanam Dakshinamurtimide Vatavitapi Samipe Bhumi Bhage Nishannam Sakalamuni Janana Jnana Dataram Arat Tribhuvana Gurumisham Dakshinamurtidevam Janana Marana Dukkha Jeta Daksham Namami Chitram Vadataro Mule Vriddha Shishya Gurur Yuva Gurostu Maunam Vyakhyanam Shishyastu Chinna Samshaya Nidhaye Sarva Vidyanam Vishaje Bhavaroginam Gurave Sarva Lokanam Dakshinamurtaye Om Namah Pranavarthaya Shuddha Jnanaikamurtaye Nirmalaya Prashantaya Dakshinamurtaye Namah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murtiveda Vibhavine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namah Om Vishwam Darpana Drishyamana Nagari Tulyam Nijantargatam Pashyannatmani Mayaya Bhairivo Bhutam Yatha Nidraya Yat Sakshat Kurute Prabodha Samaye Svatmanamevadvayam Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namadam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Bijasyantarivangkuro Jagadidam Prang Nirvikalpam Punaha Maya Kalpita Desha Kala Kalala Vaichitya Chitri Kritam Maya Vichrambayatyapi Maha Yogi Vayasvechaya Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namadam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Yasyaiva Spuranam Sadatmakam Asatkalpartakam Bhasate Sakshat Tattvamasiti Veda Vachasa Yo Bodhayatyashritam Yat Sakshat Karanat Bhavenna Punara Vrittir Bhavam Bholidhau Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namadam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Nana Chitra Ghatodharastita Maha Deepak Prabhabhaswaram Jnanam Yasya Tu Chakshuradikarana Dvara Vaisvandate Janamiti Tameva Bhantam Anubhati Etat Samastam Jagat Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namadam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Deham Pranam Apindriyam Chala Buddhim Cha Shunyam Viduhu Stri Balanda Jalopamaswamiti Bhranta Brusham Vadinaha Maya Shakti Vilasa Kalpita Maha Vyamoha Samharine Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namadam Shri Dakshinamurtaye So We have completed the first verse and we will begin the second verse. I don't know, did we spend much time explaining the second verse last class? I forget.
We did start.
We did a start. Anyway, we'll come to it. Yeah, we'll do. Each of the verses has a particular concept to clarify, and we should be aware of what the goal of each verse is. The goal of the entire text is obviously to give you a comprehensive introduction about you as a person. This is really what it's all about. This even though it is in the praise of Ishvara, but we should really see this as in the process of the praise of Ishvara, an understanding about myself. And so the goal of the text is to give you a comprehensive introduction to yourself, your life, your beginning, and so on. That's the real thing we should not lose sight of. And then an important thing to see in this regard, that even though, as we will see today also, even though some of the references are to the way Ishvara works, it should translate into our minds as to how I work. It's a very important thing, really. And I say this is important because, one can have a feeling, fine, I have an understanding of how Ishvara works. But what does that do for me? Other than the fact that I become academically somewhat wiser and I can talk about it to people, if there is some intelligent discussion going on, we should not do that. We should not introduce ourselves into that discussion. But supposing there's you can be very articulate. It doesn't really do anything about your own life. The real thing is how it affects you. And so at each stage, each verse, we should understand through, and maybe indirect, because it's almost like this is what is called paroksha jnanam versus aparoksha jnanam. So paroksha jnanam means that, in a way, it's not an exact parallel. I'm just going off the track for a second. So just like, supposing you want to, we have discussed this before, supposing you wanted to visit some pilgrimage. And so then you see pictures about the temple or the pilgrimage state and have some description about how to get there. Like for example in Amarnath Yatra, people talk about how cold it is, how difficult it is. So you get an idea of just from others' description. So this is what is called paroksha jnanam. But then if you decide to go there yourself, then that paroksha jnanam becomes aparoksha jnanam. That means it's not away, it is yours. So in a way, I would say that the description of the various concepts embedded in each one of the verses, and here in this case, the 10 verses of Dakshinamurtistotram, even though it talks about Ishvara, in a way it is paroksha jnana. Because the reason, why it cannot be done right away about yourself is because you won't accept it. It'll be too much of a jump. You cannot do that. Recently I'm reviewing a series of lectures by Swami Paramarthananda called Ashtavakra Samhita that he gave in the year 2006. A remarkable set of verses from that. So that whole book is about Nididhyasana. And the reason why it is so remarkable is that in the entire book, it is all about aham, not about Ishvara, Brahman, Atma, etc., etc. You. And so that can be done if it is in the form of a Nididhyasana. Nididhyasana means a lot of study should have already gone by. So you're actually, for example, in the case of Amarnath, you'll never be there until some description is given to you ahead of time. And so this is a staged thing where Paroksha Jnanam precedes Aparoksha Jnanam. So similarly here in the Dakshinamurtistotram, even though, this very first one, Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaha Shri Dakshinamurtaye Yaha Sakshat Kurute Prabodha Samaye Swatmanam Eva Dvayam. All of these are involved, and so the entire encomium is towards Parameshwara. Really, it is about you. So that should never be. Even today, we are going to get into this straight away about Bijasya in Avankuro Jagadidam. It just means, how do I create? So here the description is, how does Ishvara create? But the way the Ishvara creates is almost the same as the way I create. So this particular fact should be kept in mind. It was not always that clear to me as it is now after a lot of study. So the ultimate thing you should think about is, how do I do things? And how do I get out of the problems that I have created for myself? As I mentioned to you, Swami Dayanand used to say that you are the problem, you are the solution. And so this should be kept in mind in terms of how each one of these. So anyway, going back to the texts, each of the verses has a particular concept which should be kept in mind. Okay, so the first one we saw was Atma Pratyak Swarupam. That was the main concept. And Swami Maheshananji has done a great service, as many of the commentators do. Not always, but they usually do a good job of it, of pointing out the central theme of each verse. So we don't lose sight of as we get into the details of the verse. Sometimes you get into the details of the verse, but you get lost in the details. But the central theme should be always kept in mind. Now here in the second verse that we begin today, the central theme is Atma Moola Karanam. And really speaking, you know how you would, supposing you were to translate it into English, Atma Moola Karanam, you know what it would be? I am the ultimate cause of this creation. Atma is not a vastu separate from you. Atma means, even in Sanskritam, Atma means me, I. But somehow, when we're reading Sanskrit, it just seems like Atma is some nebulous thing. Atma, Atma, Atma. It's me. So even though the meaning is even though the text is very clear, but the meaning of that, I don't get it. But I should keep in mind that the central theme of the second verse is Atma Moola Karanam. And why this is important is because in many other schools of thought, the thinking is you are at the mercy of something else. You are not the responsible for the creation. You know, I mean, if you were have some scientist friends and you call them up and he says, you know, my teacher today said, I am responsible for the creation of this world. I don't know whether he would laugh or put the phone down or something strange will happen. He will probably turn to his wife or husband and say, something is going on in this person. I don't know what it is. I don't know. I have some doubts about it. He must be under a lot of stress. So this is not something we can do. And so really speaking, as we will see today, I'll give you some specific examples of it because that is the topic. This is not even agreeable, thought about, or anything. But the Advaita Vedanta says this is the way it is. You may not accept it in the beginning, but please look into that. Please don't put me down. I'm not a foolish person. And I don't have any agendas or anything. I'm just telling you, whether you agree with the truth or not is a different matter, but the truth is the truth. You are responsible for creating the entire creation. So Atma Moola Karanam. Okay, so let's get into that. A couple of other topics before we get into the various schools of thought that think that this is baloney, with some justification of their own. And so we examine it. We examine their justifications, and then after doing all of that, and it is not to put them down. They are never going to agree. And we are not out there we are not a proselytizing religion that is going to convert everybody. That's not the whole idea is to convert your own thinking, but with the use of logic. So we will go into that. But anyway, one thing that I have provided some prefix to this is that number one, which summarizes what we are going to do. I said that in the verse number 1, the self, the Atma, I alone is shown as both the intelligent and material cause of the universe. So nimitta upadana karanam. So again, please see this as not Ishvara becoming the abhinna nimitta karana, which you can also take if you like, that Ishvara is the abhinna nimitta upadana karana. I am the nimitta upadana karana. And you can see how this is done in this dream. It is not a fancy kind of a thing. This is done. We should be able to see this. So, in verse number 1, the self alone means I alone. Yeah, I think somehow maybe I should just change all the self and Atma to me, I. Anyway, but you'll get the point. Now, in order to refute the view of those schools of thought that hold that the universe is real and present the factors that other than the self, there is a cause of the universe. This Manasa Ullasa commentary is given. I mention here that an analysis of cause and effect is important. It is not casual. This is an important thing to do. Why? Because the cause always is superior to the effect, and the more you know about how things happen, the better off you will be as to how the creation takes place. Creation means that So that also is not just academic, how does the creation take place? The question is, I have problems in my life. This is the way to look at it. Every day is a set of problems. The question is, why are they happening? This is the cause and effect. It's not like, how does the world get created and so on and so forth. It should not be looked upon that. Again, you should look at it from a standpoint of how does it affect me? And for the time being, then you can say that I'm having some disease. What's the cause of it? Well, DNA. Where did I get my DNA from? Your mom and dad. Where did they get it from? And so you go back and back and back and back until you sort of get an idea. But the whole thing is, how do I solve my problems of life? That is the real importance of doing analysis of cause and effect. So that should be kept in mind. And what happens is that in the analysis of cause and effect, there are several different types of cause and effect. But for our purposes, if the cause and effect have the same degree of reality, then you can solve the problems of the effect by understanding the cause up to a limited amount. So Vyavaharika Sat, or this is what is called Parinamakaranam. Parinamakaranam means that something that transforms itself by losing its original state. And so the classical example we give is that of milk becoming yogurt. So supposing the milk becomes bad, so it happens that your refrigerator is not working very well or something. It goes bad. It doesn't turn into a yogurt, but it has a kind of a strange smell or something. And this happens, we have a spare refrigerator downstairs, and my wife was complaining that there is a problem with that refrigerator because things are not cooled very well, even though it shows that it's cooling. But the vegetables wilt, the milk goes bad, and we still have not been able to solve it. We don't spend $500 to buy a new one. We'll say, you know what, we'll live with it. Our main refrigerator is working well. So anyway, the point is that if there are some effects that you don't like, you can understand what the cause is. That maybe the temperature is not cold enough or something. And you can solve it up to a certain point. But Vedanta says that please, you can go back and forth between, why was the milk bad? Because the temperature was not proper. Why was the temperature not bad or not proper? Because it's not cooling. Why is it not cooling? So you can go up to a point and then get a new refrigerator or fix it or something and do that. But there are many problems like this in our life. Ultimately, Vedanta says, this way of analyzing cause and effect that have the same degree of reality is very limited. You are not going to get to the root cause. So this is what is called Moola Karanam. Moolam means root cause, means the ultimate. And in order to solve all the problems completely, you do need to get to the Mool Karana. Because the problems are infinite. Infinite. Just amazing how many problems there are, how many medical problems there are, all kinds of issues in life. You can never really, how are you going to solve them? So you need to get the Mool Karanam, and we need to find that out. So there we say that the Moola Karanam, in order to reach the root cause, you have to resort to understanding that there is a possibility of a cause becoming an effect without changing itself. So this is what is called Vivarta Upadana Karana. And your knowledge of Vedanta will be completely incomplete. It will be very wanting if you don't understand Vivarta Upadana Karana. It's not very difficult to understand. That just means that like gold becomes ornaments or clay becomes pots. That is what is called Vivarta Upadana Karana. But the difficulty is in applying it to our lives. That much we can understand. It's easy to understand. Even a child, I remember Kumud was telling me that she was teaching a class on Purna Vidya to these 7-8-year-old kids. And she did it for a number of years until she got so busy. And she's a superb teacher, so she did a very good job. And then at the end of the year, she would invite me to kind of preside over the year's graduation of the kids. It was very enjoyable. And these kids, both Kumud was telling me, and I could also see, these are all maybe 9, 10, 11-year-old kids. They understood how the gold becomes ornaments, that the world is like that. But you know what? It's just saying it. They don't really understand. And we don't even understand in the beginning. But seeing how this is true is really the path to freedom. And so this is something that Vedanta points out, that the analysis of cause and effect is important, and the correct analysis by employing the right kind of upadana karanam is even more important. And now you may not see it right away, but ultimately the vivarta upadana karanam is the one that you have to think about. So this was one of them. All right, so now with that, let me kind of give you a quick introduction to the alternate schools of thought that deal with all these issues. This is just one issue that we are talking about, which is cause and effect. But in the way we are all trying to understand if there is God, where is God? How did this whole creation take place? What is my relationship to it? What is my future? All of these are everybody's question. Whether everybody thinks about it or not, at the deep end of our lives, this is the common question. So then the question is, what are the answers for this? So therefore, over the last 10,000, 20,000, we don't know how much time, there are 6 schools of thought, what is called pakshas, also called vadis. Vadi means the one that say vada, means they take a viewpoint. They are pakka. They are not just casually saying it, they research it, they support it with logic, they repeat it, they teach it, they have their own books and all that. And so there are basically 6 schools of thought. And those 6 schools of thoughts believe that Vedas are in fact the pramana. So these are Vaidika schools of thought. So these schools that we saw are Vedic schools of thought. The non-Vedic schools of thought are many. And the principal among them, and in India over a long time, are the Buddhists and the Jainis. And then beyond that, there's so many others. And even I would say that Shaivites, who believe Shiva is the main person who creates everything, and Vaishnavites, can also be included in one of the schools of thought. They are not as important as the other ones, but they're considered to be. So let's take a quick view of these schools of thought. And now the Manasa Ullasa verses in the second Dakshinamurtistotram is dedicated to visiting the thoughts of each of these schools, explaining them and understanding why they are not valid. I mean, this is a huge subject, so all I'm going to be able to do to you is to give you an introduction. There's no way we can spend, because to really do to justice, you'll have to examine each of their presentable logics and come up with the refutable arguments against each one of them. This will take a long time. And so for the purposes of this class, I can just give you, in the next 4 or 5 classes, a kind of a sample so that you can explore it on your own and so on. So it's not as though I'm going to be able to prove to you sitting here. But an introduction would be useful. Anyway, so, but before we do that, before we go into the verses themselves, which we have about 24 verses, they go into it. I think we should be able to cover it in about 3 or 4 classes. I just wanted to give you an introduction to the schools of thought themselves. Okay, so here they are. So there are 6 of them, and it's interesting that in these 6 there are, where did my pen go? So there are allied brothers. So the Sankhya and Yoga belong to a kind of a subfamily. They think alike. The difference is that Sankhya does not believe in Ishvara. So this is called Nirishvara Sankhya. Whereas Yoga believes in Sa-Ishvara Sankhya. So they also have a lot of common elements to Sankhya, but the one additional one is they believe in Ishvara. Anyway, so these 2 are ideological allies. So there are 3 classes, subclasses of ideological allies. One is Sankhya and Yoga. The next one is Vaisheshikas and Nyayikas. And there is not a lot of difference between them. They also support each other. The one thing to remember is that both of these, as I have mentioned in some of the classes also, should be looked upon as the scientific way of looking at things. So they represent science. Science in the main of the way of evaluating things like science does, proving, of categorizing them, making, all of them categorize. I'm not saying these are the only 2, but they are extremely busy in making sure that everything has to be proven and so on and so forth. So the modern science is not any different from Vaisheshikas and Nyayikas. Some new particles may be developed, some new ideas may be developed, but it doesn't make any difference. So for example, the very first one that we are going to do is what is called Paramanu Karanavada. The Vaisheshika's view is presented. So we are going to look into that the very beginning of Manasa Ullasa verses number 1 and 2. Anyway, so going back to the discussion, then the Vaisheshika and Nyayikas are allied together. Finally, the third grouping are the Karmakandis, the Purva Vedas, and the Jnanakandis, which is Antaveda. So here it is not both. It can be seen as a uh, a beginning and end. It can be seen that way, or it can be seen as an introduction and a specialization. So Purva Veda is an introduction, Anta Veda is a specialization. It can also be seen, which is a good way to look at it, the Purva Vedas, the Karma Kandas, is the sadhana, is the means of knowing. And the Anta Veda, Vedanta, Vedasya Antaha iti Vedanta, is the sadhya, what is to be proved. That is the right way to look at it. Because the Vedas that are provided by Ishvara, because it is not Paurusheya, it is not human made, it is made by Ishvara. And not even made by Ishvara, it is the form of Ishvara. It never got started. It's not as though one day Ishvara said, you know what, I think I better write Vedas. That's not it. It is, they say that the Vedas are like breathing. Just like you are alive because of your breathing, so Ishvara is because of the Vedic thoughts. That is endemic to the Ishvara, always there. So the Vedas being there, it's not as though something is not recommended. So it is not proper to say that Karma Kanda is inferior and Vedanta is superior. No, that's not the point. The point is that there has to be a methodology which is appropriate to everyone in terms of how they are prepared, where are they in their progress. And Karma Kanda is an important sadhana in order to prepare your mind for Vedanta. Anyway, we'll go into more of that. You already know quite a bit about that. So anyway, so that is the difference between the Purva Veda and the Anta Veda. So anyway, these are the 6 main schools of thought with respect to the Vedic thoughts. Then we will have Buddhism, Jainism, and others that we will study a little bit later on. So we will do into that. Anyway, so this is an introduction to the schools of thought, and in fact I think I'll depart from my normal way of doing things and pause here and just ask if you had any specific questions with respect to these 6 and answer those before I go any further. Yes, Kalpana?
What does Sankhya mean?
So Sankhya is of course the name. And the reason that it is called Sankhya is it comes from the word Sankhya. So the Sankhya means counting. So they are very good in making sure that everything is counted properly. Everything is precisely counted and so on and so forth. That's what it is. And so Sankhya, for instance, means that what they believe in is that the Prakriti, which is, this Sattva Guna, Rajo Guna, and Tamo Guna, and this is all 3 of them are part of the Prakriti, and this is what is called Pradhana. So they believe that Pradhana is responsible for imbalances and balances. Just like Ayurveda also says, you have these 3 different doshas. And if there is one dosha which becomes out of line with the others, then your your health is affected. So similarly this, Sankhya also believe that there needs to be a balance between these three. And the fact that it is independent of the Atma, independent of the Atma, it has its own nature and so on. So we say, not really. Nothing can be independent of the Atma. You cannot have two separate ones. How is one going to affect the other? They say, no, we will explain it to you very well. This is how it happens. And so they came up with their own theories. So anyway, so these are the Sankhyas. But within the explanation of Rajoguna and so on, they've done a very good job. And actually it's very interesting in terms of how some of the principles of these schools of thought are used by in our own thinking. Like for example, we were discussing in the Gita class that Patanjali's yoga, it has some very useful things in terms of the steps required, yama, niyama, asana, pratyahara, etc., etc. But that doesn't mean that their end point is acceptable to us. It isn't. So we can pick and choose some of their useful practices. That's okay. But to say that these two are exactly the same is going too far. So similarly for Sankhya, we really respect their thinking with respect to the gunas. And we adopt it. And we feel that has a lot of applicability to us and so on. But to now extend it as the solution, no. It is just a sadhana. Anyway, so that's how that is.
So it's nothing to do with Sankhya Yoga of chapter 2?
No, it has nothing to do with the Sankhya Yoga of chapter 2. So Sankhya there means buddhi, it means jnanam. It means jnanam. That's why Gita can be somewhat misleading, because the same concept is presented in different synonyms. Different words are used. In fact, many times the word yogi is used. And so this is why the mimamsa has to be done. Huh?
That's Purva Mimamsa, right? Purva Veda.
No, I'm just talking about mimamsa as a concept. So mimamsa as a concept means that, see, here's the thing, it's interesting. Here, Vedas are accepted by all 6 of them, and yet their conclusions are all different. How can that be? How can that be? It is because human beings have a way of interpreting things to whatever their reasons are, suits their personality and so on. They say, yeah, and many times it is, it becomes an agenda that I want to be known as a very smart person. And I'll point out that this Vedic thing is not very well thought through. They'll ask the audience, have you gained by the Vedic thing? They'll say, no, we haven't gained it by it yet. They see, okay, you haven't gained by it, that means there is something wrong with it. So let me tell you what to do. You follow me now. That becomes a different religion. So that's how it happens. So anyway, so going back to the word mimamsa, mimamsa is the method where there is a precise analysis of what the meaning of the words are. Is it taken out of context or is it within the context? So for example, in the Gita, the word yogi is used. So supposing someone is interested in the Patanjali yoga, they will point out, hey, it says yogi. Be a yogi. Don't try to be a jnani or anything like this. So they can come up with their own interpretation of the word yogi. They'll say, it says it's right here in chapter X, line number so and so. And they can prove it. So the Mimamsa says, no, this doesn't fit what the start was, what the beginning is, what the end is, what the context is, and so on. And it uses different words to do the same thing. But so anyway, going back to Sankhya. So the Sankhya yoga there is not this Sankhya. This is a completely separate one. Yeah. Yeah, Arvind?
Yeah, about the acharyas of various this philosophy or whatever.
Yeah.
I know Sankhya is a Kapil.
Kapila, yes.
Yoga is a Patanjali.
Patanjali, yes.
I think Vaisheshika is
Uh, Karnada.
but I don't know Nayayika, Karma.
So you know what, I was hoping that I'm going to actually present all of that in this as a side one, and I'll give it to you one of these days.
Yeah.
So it'll be useful to do.
Yeah.
When we were at the Piercy ashram, it was so wonderful. In 1 week, there was one professor from Madras University, Professor Balasubramaniam. All he did was to teach us these 6 schools of thought in 4 lectures every day. So we had 28 lectures. Marvelous. We got a thorough understanding. And he's a very famous guy. He's written a lot of very good books about this and so on. And so I was thinking I'm just going to summarize some of them. And I've got a lot of new insights through Swami Maheshananji's books and so on. So this is just a very short version of that, but I will present that one of these days to you so that you have some idea about who the author is, what are their main thinking, how do they argue, all of that. Some of that will come as we go through, but this will be very short. It won't have a lot of details about it. Yes?
Are these schools still pretty prevalent in India today? I mean, all these groups?
More or less, yes, they are present. I believe that, I read that in Swami Maheshananji's book, I also don't know that much, that out of these 2, the Nayayikas have now taken over. They represent the Vaisheshika view. So the Nayayikas are what I would say, spiritual scientists, if there is a word like that. So they feel that they carry the flag of the so-called scientific community. So that is so Nyaya means logic. And so everything has to be very logical. And I believe I read that in this book exactly, that the influence of the Vaisheshikas in the modern India has waned, but the Nayayikas are still going very strong. Of course, Purva Veda and Anta Vedas is the main one, yeah. Sankhya, for whatever reason, I'm not quite sure, has a lot of, it is very well regarded by a number of scholars who really don't know what they're talking about, unfortunately. This is the thing. They think they're very scholarly. I had interesting, when I just came back from studying at the Piercy course in 1982, and we had a very thorough analysis. This was just 1 week, but we had 2 years of analysis and so on. So then there was a friend of mine who's still a very good friend, whose grandfather was a great scholar of Sanskrit and so on. So he was asking me, what have you studied and so on. I remember one thing he said was that my grandfather told me, forget about Vedanta, just study Sankhya. That is where it all is. So he was kind of putting me down, that you've been wasting your time. Do you know anything about Sankhya? Of course I do, but I'm not going to so I didn't say anything. Didn't say anything at all. I still remember that conversation that I had about 35, 36 years ago. So Sankhya is very well regarded in that sense. Ultimately, it doesn't work. Because I think that what the ultimate calling card is, does it work or not? And we do not find any Jivan Muktas other than Vedanta. Just don't find them. They're scholars and they may be relatively happy, we don't know, but in terms of Jivan Muktas, anyone who is a wise person, who is a realized person and so on, is only due to Vedanta. So forget about the theoretical aspect of it, it does not work. And therefore should be just completely shunned.
Isn't that each one's perception, whoever is a staunch believer in that, they will believe in this thing that is their liberation?
They may believe, yeah, they may believe, but I think that if you look at their behavior and so on, they fall short. This is what our literature tells us. I don't know, but yeah.
So as a Vedanta student, I mean, all this school of thought is challenging for normal student, but if we have a faith in just the Vedanta, do we really want to go through all
No, we don't. No, we
exercise?
don't. But I tell you what happens is, yes and no.
No, the reason is we are not going to go and tell anybody or do what.
No, that's not the
with
reason, but listen to
anybody.
me. So here's the thing. It may not matter whether I'm a scholar of these schools of thought. That's not the main purpose. The main thing is that these schools of thought represent my own doubts. I'll give you one example. This is an important thing as we are discussing the second verse. So, let me back up for a second. We have about a few more minutes. Okay. So in this book that I'm just going to cite you an example, and I'll close this concept that I'm starting, so I won't forget it. So in this book that I'm studying, which is called Ashtavakra Samhita, that Swami Paramarthananda has taught in 2006. And the way Swami Paramarthananda is pointing it out, very nicely I think, it's nothing brand new to us, but I applaud his method of categorizing concepts in a way that one can grasp. So what he said was that, and I may have mentioned this in some of the other classes also, and I'm going to mention this more and more frequently as a very important thing, I think, is that the human being goes into three basic stages of evolution in order to reach complete mukti. Three different stages. So one stage is where you are depending upon the world for your happiness. This is how we all start. What is the rate? There's, think about, I don't know what it is, about, is it 100 babies born every second? It's just, every day a new baby is born. Lots of them around the world. And we have 6-7 billion population. We all start by understanding that my happiness depends only upon what I am dealing with. I have to manipulate it, I have to change it, I have to learn from it. There are some modulations to that thought, but the basic thought is my dependency is upon the world. And so this is where you have this fourfold purushartha, which is artha, kama, dharma, and moksha. So the artha and kama are the two primary methodologies for this first phase of our life, which is world dependence. Then, due to some reason, we start suspecting that there is some other factor. It is not just pure luck that people do well or have accidents or something. There's something going on. And something needs to be looked into. And that is the beginning of the search for God dependence. Not just the world dependence, but a dependence on someone who can help me. Who can help me? And just the thought, and so this requires a certain faith. And if you have that, then your mind really becomes a lot quieter. Where you know that I am not alone, there is someone is in charge of me, in charge of the world, and I will be helped further. Here the Punya Papa also play a part. Dharma becomes an important element in the dependence of this person. So this becomes, so first of all, there is a dual relationship between me, the jiva, and the world. This is the first phase. In the second phase, there is a triangular relationship between me, the Jagat, and Ishvara. And so there is a dependence of all three factors in terms of my kartritvam, my bhoktritvam, and also prarabdha, understanding that there is something as momentum, there is something as adrishtapala, there is something called papa, punya, etc. There is in fact someone there to protect me. So this is the second phase. And in some ways you can say that the karma kanda, either it could be in any religion. It doesn't, at that point it does not matter that you just study the Hindu religion or anything, in any religion. Of course some other religions misuse it by not making sure that the means are consistent with the end. You have such faith in the God saying that if I can kill someone else, I am helping God. It's just stupidity. It's just... So anyway, leaving aside that, the dependence on God characterizes the second stage. And in the Vedic way of looking at it, the karma kanda is primarily a very important way to have a shraddha towards puja, towards karma, towards chanting, towards all of those, and finding some solace in it. Anyway, so that's that. Then the final third stage is not world dependence, it is not God dependence, it is self dependence. And the self dependence is the one that all of us are moving towards. even God dependence is only a sadhana. World dependence is also a sadhana. Self-dependence is the sadhya, where you are no longer looking for moksha, you are the moksha. You are the moksha. Okay. So this is the way I think we should begin to look at how our phases of life are. Okay. So now going back to the question that Arvind had, that why is it necessary for me to study all these schools of thought if we are only going to study Vedanta? I don't need to really do. And my answer to that was not entirely true. It is not as though I'm trying to become a very smart person so that I can impress everyone. That's not the point. But here's what it is. I cannot embrace self-dependence. I cannot switch over from dependence to independence unless I think about all my doubts and clear them. How can I be independent? That doesn't make any sense. I am totally dependent. I can't even go 4 hours without needing food. What are you talking about? So I am totally dependent on things. How can you talk about dependence? And then there's these various schools of thought, like these Vaisheshikas and so on, they all say, yeah, this is stupidity. That Atma is the Moola Karanam. Absolute stupidity, you're right. So they do not, it's not as though I learned something new, but I actually get a confirmation about my own doubts. It's, hunger means particles, and I'm dependent on the particles. Something is creating hunger. Something is creating dependence, bodies, minds, and so on and so forth. Who is that? I cannot be totally independent. It is only from a deeper analysis of what the meaning of the self is, what the nature of the self is, for my own sake, not for becoming a scholar, but my own mind poses these doubts and questions. What are you talking about? How can you be independent? This is why I said at the very beginning of the class, that's really so, all of this is not Ishvara. We already know Ishvara is independent. That is the very definition of the word Ishvara. By definition, he is Ishvara. He is independent. The question is, how am I going to get independent? And so not until I examine the unseen doubts in my mind. It's not as though my mind challenges me, but it doesn't allow me to go any further because I get arrested by all of my subconscious thoughts. I cannot be independent. I'm hungry. So all of those have to be. So that for that reason, we have to examine. And these schools of thoughts have done a very good job of articulating the doubts that I cannot do it myself. I'm not smart enough to have those doubts. But if I listen to the arguments in a very intelligent way, then I also get educated. So this is what it is said that even now the same thing is done. That you teach your mind as though you don't teach me, but teach my mind. So similarly, when Vashishta was teaching Rama and Lakshmana, Vashishta knew that Rama is Ishvara. is Ishvara. And so it's an insult to teach Ishvara, hey, do you know who you are? You are Bhagavan himself. All that needed to be done was to awaken the Ishvara in Rama. And the way to awaken Ishvara in Rama was the following. They would have a class, what we are told, and Rama and Lakshmana, really Lakshmana was not Ishvara, but he was taught by Rama later on. But Rama primarily was asked to sit on the side as though he is auditing the class. And Vasishtha was teaching the class, hey, do you know you are the very Ishvara? In the meantime, Rama also got educated. So then both the objectives were met. Objective number one was to awaken the Ishvaratvam in Rama. The other one is not to insult him by saying, don't you know who you are? You cannot do that. That's papa. It's like telling Ishvara, you fool, you have no idea who you are. And so even now they say that in the Shankaracharya mutts, Sringeri and all these other mutts, so whenever there is a new Shankaracharya that is being trained, and so what they do is, just like in Buddhists also, just like in the Dalai Lama's case, they find an individual on observation who very closely matches what is required to become a very evolved being. There has to be you can see from the children, a person who is cheerful, very tolerant, and hardworking, and knows what has to be done, but is not running roughshod over others. So there's a certain beautiful personality. So these guys are experienced in sort of observing the people. And then they choose someone, usually a male rather than a female, and say, this boy is the one that is going to be the next Dalai Lama. And this boy is going to be the next Shankaracharya. So, but the Shankaracharya, who is only 7 years old, is not yet a Shankara. He's an incipient Shankaracharya. So I'm told, Swami Dayananda used to say that what is said is exactly like in Rama's case. So this boy is asked to sit on the side, and the whole class is taught Vedanta. And he learns it by osmosis. And so similarly here also, in our case also, what happens is that our own Atma, examples have to be given about Ishvara and how this is done and what are some of the doubts that you can have and so on. But in the process, I listen to it. And finally, as this book says, the Ashtavakra book says, that, and this is why Swami Paramarthananda made a point, that in the entire Ashtavakra book, they don't talk about Ishvara, Brahma, Atma, they say you. So this is why it is Nididhyasanam, it is not Shravanam. And it says that you have to just think about, I am self-dependent. How? And if you have done Shravanam well, those arguments are brought in. Yes, it's possible. Atma can create anything. Atma can create a swapna avastha, a dream state, which is amazing, which creates a miserable dreamer with lots of problems. Create it. Even though the Atma itself is devoid of any problems, it can create a problem. And not only create a problem, it creates not only a problem goer, but also the rest of the dream that bothers him. It can create. Similarly, it is said that our goal should be that the problem that I ascribe to me at this point is really not mine. They belong to my mind, my body, my senses. They do not belong to me. This has to be understood. Once it is understood, I am free. And so for that reason also, for me to become self-dependent, not God-dependent, not world-dependent, I have to go through all arguments that bother me from becoming infinite at this point in time. This is the general. Okay, so with that, we can stop here and do the rest of the Dakshinamurtistotram. And if there are still some questions, I can take that up. Otherwise, we will do it next time.
I think a similar process for selecting Dalai Lamas, or almost a similar
I think
process.
so. This is what I understand. I don't know much about it, but yes, I think so. Very similar.
Sringeri Shankaracharya, the young man,
Yeah,
still, the older Shankaracharya is still there.
correct.
But he's probably 32 years old.
Yeah. So this takes a long time for them to. I mean, this is the beauty about the study of Vedanta, that properly done, anyone can do this. It's just that we may not be ready. We may not be capable enough to.
We need polish.
Yeah, so we may not be ready, but it may be next life. Doesn't matter. It's not for us to say that. So the very requirement for knowledge is preparation. Any kind of a sophisticated knowledge, even in physics, chemistry, law, etc., is preparation. If you're not ready, it's not the lack of knowledge. The knowledge is there, but are you qualified to receive it? And the Shankaracharyas have to get themselves prepared. They have to study, they have to know Sanskrit, they have to repeat, they have to chant, they have to be kind to others. There's a lot of factors involved, and if you do that, then there is no reason why you cannot grasp the whole thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Since you brought it up, this one, because when we did the Gita study by Swami Puja Swamiji's home study group,
Yeah.
and he had so much, every chapter or so many verses, he has a Purva Mimamsa and the Vaishika view and all that. And we skipped that initially because we thought that, oh God, we don't want to go and confuse ourselves. Until recently, Paramathanandaji's Chandogya Upanishad, when we started the 6th chapter, this is where it's coming that why it is important to look at the different school of thought. So now it makes sense that you are clearing your own doubts.
Doubts, yeah. Yeah, it's not to have a debate, public debate or anything like that. Yeah, absolutely. Om Rahu Grasta Devan Karendu Sadisha Maya Samachadana Sammatra Karano Pasamharanato Yogo Sushuptav Kumar Raga Swap Samiti Prabodha Samaye Yav Pratyabhigyayate तस्मै श्री गुरुमूर्तये नमः। श्री दक्षिणामूर्तये। बाल्यादिष्वजागृतादिषु तथा सर्वास्वस्थास्वपि व्यावृत्तास्वनुवर्तमानम् इत्यन्तस्फुरन्तं सदा स्वात्मानं प्रकटीकरोति भजतां यो मुद्रया भद्रया तस्मै श्री गुरुमूर्तये नमः। श्री दक्षिणामूर्तये। विश्वं पश्यति कार्यकारणतया स्वस्वामी सम्बन्धतः शिष्याचार्यतया तथैव पुत्रपुत्राध्यात्मना भेदतः स्वप्ने जागृतिवाय एष पुरुषो माया परिभ्रामितः तस्मै श्री गुरुमूर्तये नमः। श्री दक्षिणामूर्तये। भूरम्भांस्य नलो नीलोऽम्बरमहर्षणात् इमांशु पुमान् इत्याभाति चराचरात्मकमिदं यस्यैव मूर्त्यष्टकम् नान्यत् किञ्चन विद्यते विमृशताम् यस्मात् परस्मात् विभो तस्मै श्री गुरुमूर्तये नमः। श्री दक्षिणामूर्तये। सर्वात्मत्वमिति स्फुटीकृतमिदं यस्मादमुष्मिन् सर्वे तेनास्य श्रवणात् तदर्थमननात् ध्यानाच्च संकीर्तनात् सर्वात्मत्वमहाविभूतिसहितं स्यादीश्वरत्वं स्वतः सिद्ध्येतत्पुनरष्टधा परिणतं चैश्वर्यं ज्ञानम्। तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय। पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति